Um, my name's Tara. I'm the music therapist here at Triangle Springs. And I'm really excited to be talking a little bit about what I do. And I want to thank you for showing up and for wanting to learn more about music therapy. I also want to thank you for all of these wonderful titles that I've been given since coming to Triangle Springs. I've gotten musical therapy, entertainment, sound therapy, that was actually a cool one. Recreation. So some of these are legit things. You've met our recreation therapist, and some of these are wonderful things. You've met our recreation therapist. But none of them are me, which is why they're crossed out today and why I'm here. So I understand that I am the first music therapist to really work here for at least this long. And I wanted to bring an opportunity for you to learn more about it. And the reason I find that to be important is because, one, we can better our patient care that way. If we don't have an answer for a question, then we need to find somebody who does have an answer. So by presenting today, I'm hoping to give you more information as to how a music therapist might be of even more help to our treatment team. Second, correction of title, as I've already mentioned. There's been times when I've been referred to as the wrong thing on the unit, but also in documentation. That's an easy and quick fix as long as we're made aware of it. And lastly, and the most important one, is advocacy. Music therapy is a growing profession, and that's only because of the advocates that we have. So I'm hoping that I'll give you enough confidence and the knowledge that you leave with today to approach a situation where someone might be curious about what music therapy is, or if it's ever to be incorrectly defined. So, I skipped a part, but the outline will pretty much start with the definition, and everything following the definition is backing up that definition, ending with a sample session. Can I have somebody read the definition of music therapy?
Great.
I think everybody in here can read. I'll read it for you. Music therapy is the clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized wellness goals within a therapeutic relationship by a credentialed professional who has completed an approved music therapy program.
Thank you. Well done. So you can see that I've highlighted or put in bold some of the important parts of this definition, and those are the parts that we're really going to touch upon throughout the presentation, starting with what makes a credentialed professional in music therapy. So number one, completing a bachelor's degree or higher from an approved college or university. And this college or university must include the musical foundations, the clinical foundations, and the music therapy foundations. Number two, while you're completing that bachelor's degree, you're also completing the clinical training needed, which is 1,200 hours of going from facility to facility and then practicing in-person training or sessions with those patients. So when those two things are completed, and this also includes a 6-month internship that goes towards those hours, it covers about 800 of those hours. After this is completed, you're then eligible to sit for the board certification. Once you've passed this, you'll then receive your credentials of MTBC. A little side note here, there are a lot of people out there that still claim to be music therapists. So if you ever get the opportunity to hire a music therapist, you need to make sure that they have those credentials. And lastly, continuing education. You have to complete 100 CMTEs every 5 years to maintain this license. So if you take anything from this slide, I ask that you recognize that it's not just you sit down at a computer for 3 hours and you flip through some slides. Maybe you can get it under an hour and a half if you flip really fast, and then it's going to spit out a certification and bam, you're a music therapist. There's a lot of people that assume that. So just recognize that it's a lot more work that goes into it than just that. Okay, so the 1789 is the first music therapy reference to ever be made. This was in the Columbian magazine titled Music Physically Considered. It's the first time that music was ever considered to be something more than entertainment. And in 1800 is when the first music therapy intervention was ever recorded. And this is seen in the picture over here, performed by Dr. Corning. But not until 1945 were big leaps within music therapy made. During the World Wars, not enough people, or the nurses and the doctors, they didn't have enough pain medication for the number of people walking into the hospitals. So musicians were volunteering their time to come in and entertain those patients, sitting at their bedside and playing for them. But the nurses and doctors were realizing that there was a decrease in pain. There was an elevation of mood. So this raised a lot of questions for scientists. They began to wonder, we know music can positively influence us, but how is that possible? How can we make this evidence-based? This followed with, in 1994, the first music therapy degree program was founded at Michigan State, and then in 1998, the official Music Therapy Association came about. I understand that I'm talking to a whole bunch of people in the field of mental health, so I know that you know the anatomy of the brain, but I wanted to include this so that we could look primarily at the temporal lobe, because I'm gonna pull an example from how music can directly affect that part of the brain. But it does not mean that music can't affect all these other parts of the brain. So temporal lobe controls the understanding, the language, hearing, speech, memory, learning, sensory, and also one that's not mentioned on there and is very, very important is your basic emotions and feelings. If you look at this diagram here, it shows a smaller section of that temporal lobe called and I've been practicing this, amygdala. And this is the part of the brain that's very, very much in control of your emotions. So we know that it involves the emotional reaction to music. A music therapist at this point is asking the questions, how can I utilize music in the best way to influence these parts of the brain here? So it's these three theorists that prove a really good point. Perry says, thank you. Perry says, since trauma has a visible impact on the primitive brain, interventions which also operate at a preconscious level should logically be more effective than cognitively mediated strategies. Goes on to say, trauma symptoms are mediated by an amygdala that has become hypervigilant to threat-related cues, and therefore activities which regulate physiological arousal will be helpful in stimulating the vaguely modulated social engagement system in positive ways. So if you've been to Triangle Springs long enough, you've probably walked past the room where we're playing the instruments and we're having a good time. It looks awesome, and it is, usually. But a music therapist is seeing a lot more than just that elevation in mood. If you were to plug in instrument play where it says interventions or activities, then maybe that instrument play is actually working on things on a preconscious level as well. It's affecting the part of the brain that is most influenced by trauma. So to back that up, it says that rhythmic activities can fulfill this function by reawakening feelings of pleasure and engagement dulled by prolonged trauma exposure, and that rhythm stimulates patterned, repetitive neural brainstem activity necessary for restoration of brain functioning. So when you're walking past that room and you see all these patients playing the instruments, those patients are working on so much more than just that elevation in mood. If a patient is having a hard time keeping a beat, as simple as this, then that's gonna possibly show that there's a lot more going on in that part of the brain. Especially if they're able to congruently and verbally respond back in an appropriate way, yet they're still having difficulty with something that simple. It goes to show that maybe that part of the brain has been affected by trauma. This is one example of how music can directly affect the brain, but there are a lot of other interventions that music therapists use that are evidence-based. And these include all of the following. They're split up into 4 sections based on the process of each intervention. So the recreative section here covers those hands-on interventions where you're gonna physically ask the patient to play the instrument or sing the song. Receptive is listening and then responding, whether that be non-verbally, verbally, or through a different modality. I think art is an example there. Compositional, giving the patient an opportunity to create something of their own. And then lastly, improvisational, which is the use of spontaneous music making. You can see how these 4 different categories of interventions may be useful depending on what goal you're reaching for that patient, what the situation is with that patient. And those goals can include any of the following: increase of awareness, development of coping mechanisms, distress tolerance, mood, so on. If we go back to our definition here, you can see we've covered how music therapy is clinical and evidence-based, the different types of music interventions, what a wellness goal might look like, what makes up a credentialed professional, and also what makes up an approved music therapy program. With the remainder of our time today, I would like to encourage everyone here to participate in what a music therapy session might look like. I do want to mention that it won't be an actual therapy session. I'm not going to ask you additional questions.
was like, I gotta go.
But as similar as we can get to it, which is what this is all for. So, have you ever heard, has anyone in the room ever heard of the cut-up method before? Okay, so the cut-up method is a form, a technique that's used in a lot of forms of writing. The first person to ever use this, though, in songwriting was David Bowie. And how he did this was, as he was reading, whether it be a book, a newspaper, an article, listening to another song, he would take words that were intriguing to him, and he would cut them out, and he'd place them in a box, and then he'd take that out one day, and he'd start arranging the words to create his own work. We're gonna use that technique today, just adapting it to meet our needs of getting this done in 15 minutes. So I have papers here, and they're a bunch of different random literary works. In a second, if you could take one of these papers and find one phrase or sentence that sticks out to you. I am going to collect them, and we're gonna have to break up into groups. Yeah, we're gonna have to do that. So if we could do groups of 3, just find a group of 3, and together find one phrase that sticks out to that group, okay? If you have any questions, let me know. We can go ahead and take out whatever papers.
So one paper per group?
It doesn't matter. You can
So
tell
we'll
you
be
find
here.
one.
I don't know, look. Everybody say their name.
Especially for our dynamics.
Leon.
So one.
Why don't you pick one phrase per group?
Oh, okay.
One phrase per group, yeah.
Everybody, I don't know. Stick out to y'all.
We're not gonna do that.
Cause everybody cried.
Yeah, right, yeah, I was one of those,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was one of the two for me. It hurt.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's our phrase. What's
Perfect.
what do you next? Wait.
We'll let her know when.
Okay.
What is it? Because everybody
Cause
hurts.
everybody hurts.
Perfect.
Let's do it. I like it.
It's a comma after it, it's a period, but,
I think you just need a part.
yeah, that first part of it, I wrote them and I missed them when.
We're still reading the same.
I got a question.
Too long.
So when she said,
I wrote them in,
like,
you know, I
when
see them and stuff, I
music,
wrote them.
she said, like, when you were in a music therapist lesson, and a patient just can't get a simple beat, and she said it could be some additional trauma for the
No,
patient.
so you're
Yeah.
not
But
gonna
how
put
do
it
you
up,
not
but
know
I
it's
will
just the
collect
person
them
knowing
up
how to
here,
read?
so when you have it.
That's a good question.
You can
I think
just
it's
let
more
me
from
know, and I'm gonna
observation,
add it here.
like
We're ready.
being able to tell,
Alright.
like having a, yeah, that's fair.
Alright, go ahead.
I hug them every time I see them and tell them I love them.
Those are children. That's first time kids.
It could be, like, read to the his office.
Oh, well, he loves us, so.
He does that. One of you be gracious every time he sees you. To allow kindness beyond. Oh, you want to see this on your
Oh, my God.
Say what that last part.
To allow kindness beyond thought and hurt.
I like that. All you secret stuff out. That's right for us.
Thought and hurt, was that it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And,
Oh gosh, okay. And the fire in our hearts will be blowing up the stars.
We got a really quick one.
Right.
blowing up the.
Stars.
We're really good.
Because everybody hurts.
Oh, we just made a song.
You're gonna sing it, she gonna sing it. I'm excited.
I mean, it really goes together.
Alright.
What was that? You wanna jump in and add a line real quick?
I think you gotta know, 'cause she gonna give us a standard version. She gonna make it really kind
You can help us with the rest of it.
Okay, she got that.
Alright, so, we're gonna go phrase by phrase right now, and order these depending on how, to make our own song. You can take out words, you can replace words, you can switch things up as much as you want. This is just kind of our inspiration up here, okay? So, does anyone have a suggestion?
Can you make it a little bigger?
Yeah, I'm
Like,
trying.
yeah.
I have big eyes, so it's like helpful.
We're relying on you.
Just saying. We can just ask that guy.
So you got it.
I was just reading it. You got four? Four, and then contact. It helps open like that.
I'm terrible.
Try Control Plus.
Thank you.
That's mine. Yeah.
There we go, look at y'all.
There you go.
Team effort.
Alright, does anyone have any suggestions of which of these lines should come first?
The in the fire in our hearts. Yeah, that part.
Okay? And if there's anything you wanna add or change, let me know. I don't know why, I'll copy and paste next time. Alright,
Now it's time. Oh, you need a next one?
Because everybody hurts kind of connects to with, I hug them every time I see them.
Oh,
No.
yeah, okay.
I would say now it's time.
Now is the
Now it's time for, yeah, after that, now it's time for everyone to be gracious. Or after, wait a minute,
Now is the time for when.
now it's time for everyone to, okay, hold on.
Are you, yeah, you're cutting it up, right?
Yeah,
What did you say?
Then
Is it fire?
that one.
comes next.
Then the fire in our hearts will be blowing up stars. Now is the time for one of you to be gracious.
Cause everybody hurts.
Cause everybody hurts, I hug them every time. Yep, there you go.
It is a real song.
I'm
To
to allow privacy while the dog hurts.
I'm giving
The
you
hug
that
one,
now.
do the hug one next,
No, the hug one is next, yeah.
and then the kindness.
Yeah.
What are we doing working here? We just need to go make some songs.
I mean, we all be producers.
Kale's gonna sing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to sing.
All right,
Feels
I'm
that.
here for it.
And then following. And is there any words that I need to take out or add?
So you said the fire in my heart, I will be going with the stars.
Mm.
Cause it says I hug them every time I see them.
Right.
Heart.
Now, for us to be gracious.
Because everybody hurts. I hug them every time I see them and I tell them I love them. It's just like them is too much and that, like, them. There's a lot of thems in it.
Okay. I hug them every time I see them and tell them I love them. So how can we shorten that a bit?
Because I love them and I hug them.
Give a hug every time.
Okay.
Everybody hurts. Give a hug. Yeah.
Because
Give a hug
we-
every time you see them and tell them no.
And no,
We
or,
can put hug them when
or-
I hug and love them every time I see them.
Mhm.
And then it's just one less them. And I have two thems instead of three. So I hug and love them every
Okay.
time I see them.
Hug and love them every day. Wait.
I love and hug. I hug and love.
I love
Love and hugs sound better.
Love, I think love should come before hug.
Okay. I love and hug them.
I love to
I love to punch them.
That's a little too far.
No, I think that's a bit much.
Like you guys can hug me too. I'm thinking I just see you again. I love them.
Somebody emotional, because everybody hurts. I hug them every time I see them. What if you just took love out?
I hug them every
To
time.
allow kindness beyond talking.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the hug is the action for kindness.
The business office.
Cold-hearted as y'all think I am.
someone very calculated.
All right.
Love is a hard word for me.
Now, you can see up here we have the musical elements. This is where we're going to attach the emotion.
I'm making music, girl.
Alana said she's trying to work.
This is where we're going to attach the emotion to these lyrics here. So the first thing that we need to decide upon is major, minor, or both. I'm going to show you those options. But do we have anyone in here that can play the guitar or would like to play the guitar? Me either.
I mean, I can try.
Yeah?
I mean, I think. I'm not musically inclined in any way. Just saying.
We're gonna let you do that. Show
If you had a
everybody.
piano, that'd be nice.
Wendy, can you play the guitar?
play the guitar?
Wendy, come on.
Alright, just you. So here is a minor progression first. That was a lie. Here's a minor progression. Here's a major progression. Do you hear this? How would you describe the difference?
One's happy, one's sad.
Okay, so that's how most people say it, but although it's opinionated, but most people would say that the minor is more melancholy or sad in sound. The major is often paired with bright. We could also do a combination of both of those, which would sound like this. So find to be most appropriate.
I think
In your
nature. I'm feeling the hug and the love vibe.
Well, can we do one and then the other? Like, could we start a little melancholy and then get a little happier when we're hugging?
Yep.
Yeah,
Do a combination of both of them.
I'm coming for you, Lauren.
All right. Now the style is the strum has been what I've been doing this whole time. The finger picking.
I like that. I like the boom shake. No, okay.
Alright, so
But not the
I'll vote it, so it doesn't matter.
I think we're finger picking.
let's go with finger picking. We're just gonna skip 3 and 4, and I'm just gonna do my best, but you see the point. You would go through these, as a way of the patients being able to attach that emotion to the lyrics here. Alright, can I ask somebody to trade me seats? So, actually, I can just look here, that's fine. Alright. Does anyone in here wanna sing it?
Carol City is.
You came in last
Sure.
night, I think there's two
Do it.
I came in last, so I'm not very familiar with these lyrics. So, you know, someone more familiar.
That was a good deflection.
Thank you.
Alright, here we go. Far in my heart, we will blow up these stars. And now is the time for us to be gracious. 'Cause everybody hurts sometimes. 'Cause everybody hurts sometimes. And I make sure to hug them every time I see them. To allow kindness beyond thought and hurt. 'Cause everybody hurts sometimes. And everybody hurts sometimes.
I just felt the relief.
Terry, you always say secretly like microphone. I don't know how it carries.
But-
Didn't even do that
Yeah.
Summarize and just take a moment. You just wrote that song today, and you did it together. The theme within these papers today were support, and I want to ask, do you feel that your lyrics, this song, offered support? We work together every single day at Triangle Springs, and I feel lucky to be a part of a team that's so supportive. I feel very supported for how many people showed up to